5 smart ways to respond to arrogant and toxic people. Have you ever met someone who walks into a room and instantly drains the energy out of it? Someone who thinks they're always right, always superior, and never wrong, even when they clearly are. Arrogant and toxic people have a way of making you doubt yourself, question your worth, and react emotionally to their behavior. But what if the real power isn't in fighting them, but in responding smarter than they expect? Today, we're diving into 5 intelligent, emotionally strong ways to handle arrogance without losing your peace, your confidence, or your dignity. This isn't about arguing, proving yourself, or becoming like them. It's about mastering your reactions, protecting your energy, and showing that the most powerful person in the room is the one who refuses to be controlled by someone else's behavior. If you're tired of feeling drained, confused, or belittled by certain people, this video will show you exactly how to rise above them. With clarity, confidence, and unshakable self-respect. Stay calm, because their goal is to trigger you. 900-word detailed paragraph-style explanation. When dealing with arrogant and toxic people, the first and smartest strategy is learning how to stay calm, because the truth is, their biggest weapon is not their words, their attitude, or their arrogance. Their biggest weapon is their ability to trigger you. Toxic people feed off emotional reactions the same way fire feeds off oxygen. The moment you react, whether with anger, frustration, defensiveness, or sarcasm, they feel validated, superior, and in control. That's why staying calm isn't just about being polite or composed. It's about strategically refusing to give them the emotional fuel they're desperate for. The calmer you remain, the more powerless they become, and the more visibly their arrogance begins to collapse. This is the foundation of emotional intelligence, and it changes the entire power dynamic without you ever having to raise your voice or explain your worth. When someone arrogant talks down to you, interrupts you, invalidates your perspective, or tries to belittle you, the natural instinct is to defend yourself, to explain, to argue, to prove your point. But that instinct is exactly what toxic people rely on. They want you to get caught in their emotional chaos. They want you to lose your center. They want you to descend to their level. The moment you do that, they win, because your reaction becomes the topic, not their behavior. By staying calm, you expose their behavior for what it really is: immature, insecure, and emotionally unstable. Your calmness becomes a mirror, reflecting their own lack of control back at them. And nothing is more disarming to an arrogant person than being faced with someone they absolutely cannot shake. Staying calm also helps you maintain clarity. Toxic people thrive in confusion. They twist conversations, shift narratives, exaggerate situations, and manipulate details. They create emotional storms because storms make it easier for them to dominate. But when you stay calm, you can think clearly. You can see through their tactics. You can respond with intention rather than reaction. Calmness helps you step out of the emotional fog and see their behavior objectively, which allows you to choose your responses instead of being dragged into their drama. Calmness is not passive, it's powerful. It tells them, "You cannot control me." And that message is louder than anything you could say with raised voices or defensive words. Another advantage of staying calm is that it sets an emotional boundary without you even having to speak. Arrogant people expect you to get overwhelmed, angry, or intimidated. When you don't, they're thrown off balance. Suddenly, their usual methods don't work anymore. They don't know how to respond to someone who isn't moved by their ego or manipulation. Your calmness forces them to confront the truth. They're not as powerful as they believe. And often, they start to reveal their true insecurity because your emotional stability exposes how unstable they actually are. This creates a shift in power. You're not reacting to them, they're reacting to your lack of reaction. Staying calm also protects your self-respect. When you react emotionally, you may later regret what you said, how you said it, or how you allowed yourself to be provoked. Regret erodes confidence, but responding with calmness allows you to walk away from the situation, knowing you remained in control of your emotions, your tone, and your dignity. You stayed rooted in your own identity, not pulled into their negativity. That sense of self-control strengthens your confidence and makes it easier to handle similar situations in the future. You begin to trust yourself more. Knowing that you can face toxicity without losing your peace. Calmness is also a form of silent communication. When you stay calm, you're sending a message that doesn't need to be spoken out loud. I don't take you seriously enough to let this affect me. Arrogant people hate being dismissed. They crave attention, reactions, and validation, even negative validation. So when you remain composed, you're taking away their sense of importance. You're showing them that their arrogance doesn't impress you and their toxicity doesn't intimidate you. This shift makes them uncomfortable because they're used to controlling the emotional environment around them. Your calmness disrupts their script and forces them to face their own lack of control. But staying calm doesn't mean staying silent or tolerating disrespect. It simply means refusing to engage emotionally. You can still stand up for yourself, set boundaries, express your viewpoint, or walk away, all while staying grounded. Calmness gives you the clarity to choose the right moment for each of these responses. It allows you to respond from a place of strength rather than impulse. It transforms your presence into something powerful and unshakable. You're not reacting, you're directing the energy of the conversation. It's also important to understand that calmness is not a weakness. It's a choice. It takes strength to stay calm when someone is trying to provoke you. It takes discipline to stay centered when someone is trying to pull you into chaos. It takes self-respect to hold your peace when someone tries to disrupt it. Calmness is a sign of maturity, stability, and emotional mastery, qualities arrogant people usually lack, and the contrast between you and them becomes extremely visible. People notice. The room notices. Even they notice. In the end, staying calm isn't just about dealing with toxic people. It's about protecting your mental space, preserving your energy, and asserting your worth without saying a single unnecessary word. Calmness is your armor, your strength, and your quiet victory. When you master this skill, arrogant and toxic people lose the ability to control you. They may still act arrogant. They may still try to provoke you, but none of it can touch you. Because the moment you learn how to stay calm, you take back all the power they thought they had, and that is the smartest response of all. Use boundaries as your shield, not arguments. 900-word detailed paragraph, style explanation. One of the most effective and powerful strategies when dealing with arrogant and toxic people is learning to use boundaries as your shield instead of wasting your energy on arguments. Arrogant people love debates, not because they want clarity, but because arguments give them a stage, an audience, and an opportunity to dominate emotionally. The moment you start explaining yourself, defending every detail, or trying to make them understand your point of view, you fall into their trap. Your emotional energy becomes their playground. Boundaries flip the script. Instead of participating in their chaos, you stop the game altogether. You create limits that tell them, this is where your influence ends. Boundaries are not walls, they're filters. They keep out emotional pollution while protecting your peace, clarity, and dignity. And for toxic people, nothing is more infuriating or disarming than realizing they can't access the parts of you they used to manipulate. Boundaries work because they shift your focus from controlling their behavior to controlling your access to their behavior. You cannot change an arrogant or toxic person. They are committed to their mindset because it validates their ego. But you can absolutely limit how much of their attitude you let into your emotional space. Arguments attempt to fix their behavior, but boundaries protect your well-being. Instead of telling them how to act, you tell yourself how to respond. For example, when they raise their voice, you simply don't engage. When they disrespect you, you withdraw your presence. When they attempt to belittle you, you calmly say, I'm not participating in this conversation if this is the tone. These statements are not arguments. They are declarations of your emotional standards. Once you master this shift, toxic people lose access to your energy overnight. The beauty of boundaries is that they don't require the other person's approval. They don't need agreement, permission, or discussion. Toxic people often argue because it gives them a sense of control, but boundaries remove the need for negotiation. They are decisions, not debates. When you say, I'm stepping away now, the conversation is over whether they like it or not. You aren't asking, you're informing. Arrogant people hate clear boundaries because boundaries expose how little control they actually have over you. The moment they realize they can no longer pull your emotional strings, their arrogance begins to crack. Most people struggle with boundaries because they fear appearing rude, distant, or confrontational. But boundaries are not about being harsh. They're about being healthy. They are a form of self-respect. When you set boundaries, you are saying, "My peace matters." Arrogant people rely on your fear of conflict to keep pushing. They assume you'll tolerate disrespect to keep the peace. But peace without boundaries is not real peace. It's quiet suffering. True peace comes when you teach people how you expect to be treated by refusing anything less. A boundary is a line that protects your emotional energy from being drained or distorted by someone else's arrogance. Setting boundaries also reveals people's true intentions. Healthy people respect boundaries. Toxic people fight them. When you say, "Let's continue this conversation when you're calm," a respectful person will pause and adjust. A toxic person will escalate. When you say, "I don't allow people to speak to me that way," a balanced person will apologize. A toxic one will mock you. Boundaries expose whether someone values you or only values what they can get from you. And that clarity is priceless. Boundaries also make conversations shorter, cleaner, and emotionally safer. Toxic people love drama-filled, draining dialogues. They enjoy long arguments that loop around in circles because those arguments give them emotional leverage. But with boundaries, you set the duration, tone, and topics allowed. You don't get dragged into hour-long debates that go nowhere. You don't get manipulated into defending yourself repeatedly. You simply redirect, "I'm not discussing this. This isn't productive. I won't participate in disrespect." These statements close the emotional door they keep trying to pry open. Another reason boundaries are essential is because they allow you to stay in control without becoming toxic yourself. Arrogant people often push you to the point where you feel angry, disrespected, or undervalued. Without boundaries, you might eventually explode or break down, which can make you feel guilty, embarrassed, or emotionally exhausted later. Boundaries prevent emotional buildup. They keep your responses grounded and measured. You no longer reach a breaking point because you're no longer allowing people to cross lines repeatedly. Boundaries stop resentment before it even begins. Using boundaries also trains your nervous system. Over time, you become less reactive. You no longer panic or shrink when someone tries to dominate you. Your body learns that you can protect yourself through calm, firm decisions. This is powerful because toxic people often rely on emotional intimidation. They expect you to freeze, fall silent, or get overwhelmed. Boundaries teach your body the opposite, that you are capable of maintaining control, even under pressure. This emotional resilience becomes a habit, and arrogant people lose their ability to affect you. One of the strongest boundaries you can set is distance. Sometimes, the healthiest response is simply limiting your exposure to someone who drains, belittles, or manipulates you. You don't have to cut people off dramatically. You can quietly reduce the time, energy, and access they get. This is especially important when dealing with people who don't respect verbal boundaries. Distance is the boundary that cannot be argued with. When someone repeatedly proves they can't handle front row access to your life, you move them to the back row. That is not punishment. It's self-protection. Finally, remember that boundaries are a lifestyle, not a one-time action. You must enforce them consistently. Toxic people test boundaries to see if they're real or temporary. When you hold your line every time, you train them to respect it. Or you train yourself to walk away. Either outcome protects your peace. Boundaries are your shield, your guardrail, and your emotional anchor. They turn chaotic interactions into controlled ones, and they turn power struggles into silent victories. When you master the art of boundary setting, arrogant and toxic people lose their hold on you, not because they changed, but because you did. And that transformation is the ultimate form of strength. Respond with facts, not feelings. 900-word detailed paragraph style explanation. One of the most intelligent and effective ways to deal with arrogant and toxic people is to respond with facts, not feelings. Toxic individuals thrive on emotional reactions, anger, frustration, defensiveness, or insecurity, because emotions are easy to manipulate. They know how to twist your words, push your buttons, and turn your reactions into evidence that you're irrational or overly sensitive. But facts are solid. They can't be twisted easily. They don't get emotional. They don't feed egos. Facts strip away their power to manipulate and expose the truth plainly. When you respond with facts instead of feelings, you create a calm, unshakable environment where their arrogance cannot dominate. You shift the conversation from chaos to clarity, from emotional traps to logical ground. And arrogant people hate logical ground because logic reveals the weaknesses they try to hide behind their confidence. Toxic people often speak with authority, not accuracy. They exaggerate their achievements, inflate their importance, and rewrite situations to make themselves look superior. They rely on emotional pressure, not truth. So when you respond with facts, clear, concise, and neutral, you challenge the foundation of their arrogance. For example, if someone tries to blame you for something you objectively didn't do, reacting emotionally gives them room to escalate. But saying, "Here's what actually happened, and here are the details," shuts down their ability to twist the narrative. Facts remove the fuel they need to keep the drama alive. Your neutral tone also forces them to face that they can't destabilize you. It's important to understand that responding with facts is not about arguing or proving yourself. Arguments give toxic people a stage. Facts take the stage away. When you state facts calmly, you stay in control. You are not trying to convince them. You're establishing clarity for yourself and for anyone observing. Arrogant people often perform for an audience. They want people to think they're right, powerful, or superior. But a factual, steady response disarms their performance. It shows others that you're consistent, composed, and grounded in reality, while they come off as emotional or unstable. This contrast often embarrasses them, even if they don't show it. Responding with facts also keeps your dignity intact. Toxic people try to pull you into emotional battles where they twist your reactions into ammunition. You raise your voice once, and they claim you're overreacting. You explain too much, and they call you defensive. You express hurt, and they say you're too sensitive. But when you respond with facts, you eliminate all the openings they rely on. You aren't raising your voice. You aren't reacting. You aren't giving them material to use against you. You're simply stating what is real. That's it. And arrogant people don't know how to control someone who refuses to play the emotional game. Another benefit of responding with facts is that it prevents you from internalizing their negativity. Toxic people are experts at projecting their insecurities onto you. They want you to feel wrong, small, or guilty so they can feel superior. But facts remind you that their interpretation of events is not reality. When you anchor yourself in truth, you stop absorbing their false narratives. You stop believing their exaggerations and their accusations. Facts become your shield, protecting your self-esteem from their emotional manipulation. They keep your mind clear and your confidence intact. Facts also expose manipulation patterns. When you lay out clear information, what happened, what was said, what is true, arrogant people often scramble. They may change the subject, attack your tone, or shift blame because they don't know how to handle someone who refuses to argue emotionally. Their reaction reveals everything: their insecurity, their avoidance, and their discomfort with truth. This gives you insight into how they operate, making you smarter and more prepared for future interactions. Suddenly, their tactics become predictable, and predictability makes them easier to handle. Responding with facts also sets a strong, non-negotiable tone. Toxic people often test whether they can control the emotional atmosphere. When you respond with calm logic, you show them the tone of the conversation is not theirs to dictate. They cannot drag you into chaos or derail the topic. You're steering the direction through clarity. This kind of emotional discipline forces them to adjust, even if they don't want to. They can't escalate if you refuse to escalate. They can't manipulate if you refuse to be moved by guilt or intimidation. It slowly trains them to approach you differently, or avoid trying to dominate you altogether. Using facts also helps you stay objective. When toxicity is flying at you, emotions can cloud your judgment. You may feel attacked, confused, or overwhelmed. But shifting your mindset to facts gives you a structured way to respond. Instead of thinking, "How do I defend myself?" you think, What's the truth here? This keeps your responses clean, powerful, and composed. You step out of the emotional storm and into mental clarity. From this place, you make better decisions, communicate more efficiently, and avoid unnecessary emotional turmoil. It's also important to pair facts with brevity. Toxic people twist long explanations. They look for loopholes in your words. Keep your factual responses short and firm. Here's what happened. That's not accurate. This is the information I have. Let's stick to the facts. No over-explaining, no emotional commentary, no softening your words to manage their feelings. This concise communication style protects you from being dragged into drama, while also signaling that you respect your own time and energy. In some situations, the most powerful factual response is silence. Refusing to respond to accusations that are baseless is a factual stance in itself. Silence says, "This is not worth addressing." Arrogant people expect reactions. Silence disrupts their expectations. It forces them to sit with their own words, something they often avoid. And silence allows the truth to become visible on its own, without you having to defend it. Ultimately, responding with facts instead of feelings is a strategy of self-control, self-respect, and emotional intelligence. It protects your peace from manipulation. It exposes toxic behavior without you having to accuse or confront. It keeps conversations grounded in truth. And most importantly, it reminds arrogant people that you are not someone who can be emotionally controlled. Facts make you untouchable. They show you're playing a different game. One toxic people can't win. When you lead with truth instead of emotion, you rise above their chaos with dignity, clarity, and unshakable confidence. Mirror their behavior back, calmly, and with control. A 900-word detailed paragraph-style explanation. One of the most subtle yet powerful ways to handle arrogant and toxic people is by mirroring their behavior back to them, calmly, intentionally, and with total emotional control. This doesn't mean copying their negativity, matching their disrespect, or lowering yourself to their level. Mirroring is an advanced communication technique where you reflect their tone, their approach, and their patterns in a controlled and composed way to make them aware of how they're behaving. It creates a natural form of accountability without you having to lecture, argue, or attack. Toxic people rarely see themselves clearly. They operate on autopilot, using the same dominating tone, interrupting habits, or manipulative strategies over and over again. But when you mirror them with calm assertiveness, you force them to confront their own behavior in a way that words alone can never achieve. Mirroring works because arrogant people are accustomed to others shrinking, accommodating, or staying silent when confronted with aggression or superiority. They expect people to soften their tone to keep peace, to ignore disrespect for the sake of harmony, or to tiptoe around their inflated ego. So when you respond in a similar structure, but without the emotional charge, it catches them off guard. For example, if someone interrupts you repeatedly, you pause and say, "I'll continue when you're finished." You're not scolding them, you're simply reflecting their action back with a boundary attached. If they use a condescending tone, you respond with a firm, steady voice. "Let's keep this respectful." You're mirroring the level of seriousness they brought into the conversation, but refusing to bring the disrespect. This subtle reflection often exposes their behavior instantly because now they're hearing the tone they used, but directed toward them with composure. What makes mirroring so effective is that it bypasses the need for emotional explanations. Toxic people don't respond well to emotional appeals like, "You hurt my feelings," "I don't like your tone," or "This is disrespectful." Their ego blocks empathy. But when they see their own behavior mirrored back, it becomes harder to deny. You're not accusing them, you're simply reflecting. And reflections are powerful because they show the truth without confrontation. Arrogant people often pride themselves on being logical or intelligent. So when you mirror them with calm logic, you place them in a position where they have to recognize their own flaws or risk looking foolish in front of others. Mirroring also protects your power. Toxic individuals try to dominate conversations, interrupt your flow, invalidate your points, or push emotional pressure onto you. When you mirror their behavior in a controlled way, you are effectively saying, "I see what you're doing, and I won't let it slide." This shifts the dynamic. Instead of getting emotional, you're using strategy. Instead of getting defensive, you're using structure. Mirroring is a form of psychological self-defense that allows you to stay poised and grounded while silently challenging their dominance. It also sets the tone for how you expect to be treated. When someone raises their voice, and you calmly say, "I'm not engaging with raised voices," you've mirrored the seriousness, but not the aggression. When someone uses sarcasm, you respond with directness instead of emotional confusion. When someone tries to belittle you, you mirror confidence, not insecurity. You show them a version of themselves that they cannot bully. Over time, mirroring conditions them to adjust how they speak to you, because they learn that their usual tactics no longer give them the upper hand. Another advantage of mirroring is that it allows you to maintain emotional neutrality. You don't have to be angry, dramatic, or defensive to make your point. Mirroring thrives on calmness. You're still in control. You're still centered. You're responding strategically, not emotionally. Toxic people expect emotional reactions, so when you respond with calm reflection instead, they are forced to rethink their next move. Your composure becomes a kind of mirror they cannot escape. Mirroring also exposes manipulation tactics. When someone tries to guilt-trip you, for example, you can respond by reflecting the structure of their statement. "It sounds like you're trying to make me responsible for your emotions. That doesn't work for me." Without raising your voice or attacking, you've held up a mirror to their manipulation. Or if someone tries to twist your words, you simply repeat exactly what you said earlier. This forces them to face that the narrative they're pushing doesn't match reality. Mirroring keeps the conversation anchored in truth, not distortion. One particularly powerful form of mirroring is matching pace. Toxic people often speak quickly to dominate the conversation or slowly to imply superiority. By matching their pace slightly, then slowing down, you signal control. You're not being pulled into their rhythm, you're setting your own. This subtle shift makes them aware that you're not intimidated or overwhelmed. You're fully present, listening, and engaging with confidence. It's important to remember that mirroring is not about revenge. It's about awareness. You're not trying to hurt them, you're trying to create a space where their behavior is visible, undeniable, and ineffective. It's a mature, emotionally intelligent strategy that allows you to defend your boundaries without escalation. Your goal is not to win but to remain grounded and respected. Mirroring also prevents emotional exhaustion. Toxic people drain energy when you argue or try to fix them. But mirroring requires minimal words and maximum stability. It saves your mental energy by keeping responses short, clear, and intentional. You no longer feel the need to explain or justify yourself. You let your composure speak for you. Finally, mirroring reminds you of your own power. You don't need to shout to be strong. You don't need to insult to assert yourself. Your strength comes from emotional intelligence, not emotional reaction. When you mirror their behavior calmly, you expose their weakness and highlight your strength. You show that you can handle confrontation without losing yourself. And most importantly, you show that you can maintain your identity even when someone else tries to distort it. Mirroring is a soft form of resistance and a strong form of self-respect. It protects your energy, keeps you grounded, and forces arrogant people to confront themselves, even if only for a moment. When used wisely, it becomes a powerful tool that helps you navigate toxic interactions with confidence, clarity, and quiet authority. Walk away as your final message of strength. 900-word detailed paragraph style explanation. One of the smartest, most powerful, and most underestimated responses to arrogant and toxic people is learning when and how to simply walk away. Not in anger, not in frustration, not as an emotional explosion, but as a deliberate, controlled, confident act of self-respect. Walking away is not weakness, it is not surrender. It is strategic power. It communicates something no argument, no explanation, and no emotional reaction ever can. You cannot access me anymore. For arrogant and toxic people, this is the ultimate loss of control, because they thrive on engagement, attention, and emotional reactions. The moment you remove yourself, you take away their power source. You starve their ego, silence their manipulation, and break the cycle they depend on. Walking away is a declaration that you value your peace more than their drama. And that message, delivered through action instead of words, is impossible for anyone to ignore. Walking away is not about avoiding problems, it's about refusing to participate in patterns that cannot be fixed. Toxic people do not change because you argue with them. They do not transform because you explain things logically. They do not become better because you show patience or empathy. They change only when they lose access to the space where they have power over you. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is step out of the emotional battlefield completely. When you walk away, you interrupt their script. They can't continue their manipulation without your participation. Their arrogance loses its target. Their toxicity loses its audience. You reclaim all the energy they once drained from you. What makes walking away so powerful is that it protects your emotional and mental well-being. Arrogant and toxic people thrive on conflict. They enjoy the feeling of superiority that comes from making others react. They want you to raise your voice, defend yourself endlessly, feel guilty, feel small, or feel overwhelmed. But when you choose not to respond, not to plead, not to engage, you protect your inner world from being contaminated. You create a sacred space within yourself where their negativity cannot enter. Walking away is the ultimate boundary, clear, firm, and non-negotiable. It requires no debate, no justification, and no approval. It is an action that speaks louder than any dialogue. Another advantage of walking away is that it reinforces your self-worth. When you remain in toxic situations for too long, even unintentionally, your mind begins to normalize disrespect. You start to tolerate things you shouldn't tolerate. You start accepting behavior you once knew was unacceptable. Walking away resets that standard. It reminds you, I deserve better. It puts your self-respect back in its rightful place, high, untouchable, and non-negotiable. Once you walk away from toxicity, your spirit grows stronger. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to believe that your peace matters. You begin to realize that you do not need to fight every battle. You only need to choose battles that honor your dignity. Walking away also reveals people's true intentions. When someone loses access to you, their reaction exposes everything. Healthy people will respect your distance. They may reflect, apologize, or adjust. Toxic people, on the other hand, will panic, blame you, chase control, or attempt guilt-tripping. Their reaction confirms what their behavior has been saying all along. You don't need to analyze them anymore. Their response to your silence shows you exactly who they are. And their response also shows them who you are. Someone who refuses to be controlled. There is also a psychological impact that walking away creates. Toxic people expect you to stay because they assume you need their validation, approval, or attention. When you walk away, you break this projection. You demonstrate independence, strength, and emotional resilience, qualities they often lack. Your departure becomes a mirror reflecting their insecurity. They may try to regain control by accusing you of being dramatic or sensitive, but deep down, they feel the loss. People who rely on arrogance are deeply uncomfortable with being ignored. Walking away deprives them of the emotional dominance they thought they had. Walking away doesn't always mean physical distance. Sometimes it means emotional or mental distance, refusing to engage in arguments, refusing to take their words personally, refusing to let their negativity influence your mood. You can still interact with someone while being completely unavailable to their toxic tactics. Emotional walking away is just as powerful because it tells them, you no longer have emotional access to me. This kind of detachment breaks manipulation faster than confrontation ever could. Another important aspect of walking away is that it helps you conserve your energy for things that matter. Arrogant and toxic people drain you, not only through conflict, but through constant emotional tension. You find yourself thinking about the conversation afterward, replaying their words, or questioning your reactions. Walking away frees your mind. It gives you space to focus on your goals, growth, peace, and purpose. It gives you back your time. It gives you back your clarity. Walking away isn't just about leaving someone. It's about returning to yourself. Some people fear walking away because they worry about appearing weak or afraid. But the truth is, it takes far more strength to leave than to stay stuck in a destructive cycle. Anyone can argue. Anyone can react. Anyone can get pulled into drama. But not everyone can choose peace over pride. Walking away requires emotional maturity, self-awareness, and courage. It is the response of someone who knows their value and refuses to let anyone diminish it. Walking away is not revenge, it is release. It's not about hurting them, it's about healing yourself. You're not walking away because you lost. You're walking away because the game they're playing is beneath the life you want to live. You're walking away because your future deserves your energy more than their drama does. Ultimately, walking away shifts your identity. You stop being someone who tolerates toxicity and become someone who refuses it. You stop being reactive and become intentional. You stop being drained and become empowered. Toxic people lose their grip on you the moment you decide that their presence is no longer worth your peace. Walking away is your final message. A message without shouting. A message without arguments. A message without explanations. A message that says, my peace is non-negotiable. My worth is untouchable. And your behavior has no place in my life. And that message is the strongest response of all.